The truth about my best friend's hidden past. Before we begin the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss more incredible stories every day. My best friend's face stared back at me from a homicide podcast thumbnail. I was wiping crumbs from a table during a slow shift at the cafe when the autoplay kicked in. I only half listened, something about a cold case from 12 years ago, until the host said, "If you're listening on video, you can see the alleged runaway, 16-year-old Noah Price." I looked up, annoyed, and froze. On the screen was Jonah's face, just younger, thinner, but definitely him. Same crooked smile, same scar slicing his right eyebrow. The caption under the photo read, "Missing, possible witness. I'm Alex, 28, professional coffee dispenser and part-time human sponge for other people's drama. Jonah is my person. We've been roommates for 3 years, friends for 5. He's the one who showed up at 2 a.m. with takeout when my dad died, who learned my order before I did, who left sticky notes on the fridge when my depression got ugly. If this podcast was right, he's also someone who lied about his name, his hometown, and his past." My stomach did this slow, sick flip as the host kept talking about a fire in some small town called Ridgeview and a boy who vanished right after. "Authorities still hope someone will come forward," she said. "We've recently received new tips." The timestamp on the video was last week. This wasn't old gossip. Someone was still looking. I imagined Jonah in handcuffs, Jonah on the front page, Jonah's stupid joke of, "I'm basically ungooglable," turning into something terrifying. I thought about the lease with both our names on it, the rent I couldn't afford alone, the mutual friends who'd never look at me the same if I kept quiet. If I swiped away, I could pretend I never saw it. If I kept watching, I might lose the only real family I have. Somewhere under the espresso machine, my phone buzzed with a text. "Jonah, got news." My hands were shaking hard enough that the sugar packets rattled. The bell over the door chimed behind me. "Dude, you look like you've seen a ghost," Jonah said. If you'd asked me yesterday, I would have sworn I knew everything that mattered about Jonah. We met 5 years ago at a trivia night my coworker dragged me to. I was bombing every category except obscure 2000s cartoons when this lanky guy in a faded band tee slid into the empty seat next to me. "You look like you need someone who knows useless facts about serial killers," he joked, and then proceeded to carry our team through the true crime round with an ease that should have been concerning in retrospect. Afterward, he walked with me to the bus stop in the rain, holding his denim jacket over both our heads like some indie movie cliché. Back then he said his name was Jonah Rivers, grew up, all over, military family, moved here for a fresh start. I didn't push. I was just glad someone wanted to sit with me, to text me stupid memes at 3 a.m., to knock on my door when I ghosted the world after my dad's heart attack. When my landlord tried to raise my rent, Jonah is the one who said, "Screw that. Let's get a place together. We'll survive on instant ramen and my charm." There were little glitches. Once, I found a piece of junk mail in our mailbox addressed to N. Price at our apartment. When I teased, "You got a secret roommate I should know about," he shrugged and said, "Probably the last tenant." Dude, landlords never update anything. Another time, sirens screamed past our building while we were on the fire escape, and he flinched so hard he nearly dropped his cigarette 2 stories down. "Bad association," he muttered, then pivoted to asking if I'd ever dye my hair blue. Sometimes, when I'd mention my childhood, he went quiet in this practiced way, as if putting on noise-canceling headphones from the inside. I remember one night, drunk on cheap beer, I asked, "Where's home for you, really?" He stared at the ceiling for a long time and said, "Wherever people don't ask that question," then laughed it off before I could answer. I told myself everyone deserves some mystery, that not everyone's trauma needs to be unpacked in the kitchen at midnight. Looking back now, all those gaps feel less like scars and more like trapdoors waiting to open under my feet. I had no idea how far I was about to fall with him. The first real crack in Jonah's story showed up in our hallway, in the form of a battered cardboard box. It was a Tuesday, right before my shift. I nearly tripped over the package outside our door. No return address, just a smudged black marker label, "Resident, APT 3B. Our landlord is cheap, but not usually this lazy." I dragged it inside, sliced it open with a butter knife, and stopped when I saw the envelope on top. It was addressed in careful blue ink to Noah, not Jonah, and the last name wasn't Rivers. It was Price. The same as the podcast. My throat went dry. I flipped the envelope over. The sender was some church in a town I'd never heard of. For a long minute, I just stood there, listening to the fridge hum. Then I did what any conflicted, slightly nosy human would. I slid one finger under the flap. Inside was a photocopied newsletter about a memorial service marking 12 years since the Ridgeview Youth Center fire, with a note scrawled at the bottom. You're always welcome here, no matter what people say. Dude, you open my mail now? Jonah's voice made me jump. He was leaning in the doorway, hair damp from the shower, eyes fixed on the envelope in my shaking hand. I thought it was mine. I lied, heat crawling up my neck. They spelled your name wrong. Again. He walked over slowly, took the paper, and stared at the word memorial like it might bite him. The color drained from his face. Then, as if remembering I existed, he crumpled the newsletter in his fist and forced a laugh. Religious spam, he said. My aunt signs me up for this crap all the time. Toss it, okay? He shoved the box into the hall closet so hard the door bounced back open. I watched him slam it again like he could nail the moment shut. I tried to be casual. Who's Noah Price? I asked, aiming for teasing and landing somewhere near terrified. He didn't miss a beat. Nobody. Just some name they messed up in the system. He flashed me that same crooked smile from the podcast thumbnail, the one that usually disarmed me. You know me, Al. I'm boring. There's nothing mysterious going on here. I told myself the churning in my stomach was just caffeine as he walked away. 2 weeks later, Jonah turned my favorite bar into a stage I never asked for. It was trivia night again, neon lights buzzing, tables sticky with cheap beer. Jonah had just annihilated a round on infamous town disasters, of all things, and was riding the high. Our team was half drunk and fully obnoxious. When the host announced we were in first place, Jonah hopped onto his bar stool, bowed dramatically, and shouted, "See, Alex, true crime obsession finally pays off. Hey, detectives actually do background checks." I joked before my brain caught up. You wouldn't have passed the paperwork. The table laughed. Jonah's smile faltered for half a second, then sharpened. He slung an arm around my shoulders and said, a little too loudly, "Relax, Al. Not everyone has the luxury of being boring and predictable." My ears burned. This dude, he announced to our friends. Googling him? Nothing. He barely exists. If I ever disappear, it's because Alex bored me to death. People chuckled, but something in the way he said disappear made my skin crawl. I thought about the newsletter hidden in our closet, about the name on the envelope. Before I could respond, a voice from behind us cut through the noise. "Noah," it said, sharp with disbelief. "Noah Price." Every molecule in Jonah seemed to freeze. His arm dropped from my shoulders. I turned and saw a guy maybe our age, face pale, knuckles white around his beer glass. The stranger stared at Jonah like he was a ghost. "You're alive," he whispered. "After what happened at Ridgeview, we thought you were." Jonah was off the stool in an instant, knocking over someone's drink. "You've got the wrong person," he snapped. His voice cracked on wrong. The guy's eyes flicked between us. "You're really going to pretend?" he demanded. "After you ran away from what you did?" Conversation died around us as Jonah leaned in, eyes blazing. His mouth was right by the stranger's ear when he said, very softly, "Walk away, or I swear you'll regret opening it again." I suddenly understood that Jonah's past wasn't just messy, it might be dangerous. We didn't talk about the bar incident until 3 days later, mostly because Jonah vanished. After he hissed at that stranger, he grabbed his jacket and stormed out, ignoring my calls. I spent the rest of the night apologizing to the bartender and refreshing his location on our shared Find Friends. His dot stayed stubbornly grayed out. He didn't come home. His bed was still perfectly made the next morning, like a hotel room before check-in. By day 3, the silence curdled. I went from scared to furious. When the front door finally creaked open, Jonah shuffled in, hoodie up, smelling like rain. "You alive?" I snapped, abandoning any attempt at casual. "Depends who's asking," he muttered, dropping onto the couch. "You or the guy from the bar?" My chest tightened. "Who was he, Jonah?" I asked. "And why was he calling you Noah?" He rubbed his eyes with the heel of his hand. "Some idiot looking for drama. People think they recognize you. They make up stories." "Actually, I don't," I said. "Because when people Google me, they don't find my face in a podcast about a fire." For a beat, he just stared. Then his expression hardened. You watched that, he demanded. Were you spying on me? Going through my stuff too? Anger flared. Your name was on the screen. And your mail shows up for Noah Price. I'm not imagining this. He stood up so fast the coffee table rattled. Drop it, Alex. I'm serious. You want to keep living here? Then stop digging in places that have nothing to do with you. That absolutely has something to do with me. I shot back. We share rent, friends, a life. If some psycho from your past shows up, I'm involved whether you like it or not. He grabbed his keys again. You sound like them, he spat. Always wanting details, like my trauma, is entertainment. The door slammed so hard a picture frame tilted on the wall. Later that night, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. The text preview on my screen read, "This is Riley, Jonah's sister. He says you're asking dangerous questions about him." I stared at those words and realized Jonah had already started rewriting me as the enemy. Riley called the next afternoon while I was on my break, sitting on a milk crate behind the cafe with my apron still on. I didn't mean to freak you out, she said after introducing herself. Her voice was steady in that tight, practiced way of someone used to damage control. Jonah just sounded upset. I wanted to make sure everything was okay. Depends on your definition of okay, I replied. Are you going to tell me that I'm imagining all the weirdness, too? She exhaled. For a moment, all I heard was traffic and the clatter of dishes inside. He's always been dramatic, she said carefully. He's been through a lot. Sometimes people latch onto him or accuse him of things because of what happened when we were teenagers. The Ridgeview fire? I asked, heart racing. The podcast, the mail. That wasn't nothing. Silence. Then, softly, he told you that? No, I said. A stranger at a bar did. And the internet. Jonah just keeps telling me to drop it. Then maybe you should, she said quickly. He's finally doing okay. He has a job, an apartment, friends. If people drag old stories up, they'll ruin that. You don't want that, right, Alex? The way she said my name made it sound like a test. I chewed on my thumbnail. If it's just stories, why is he so scared? I asked. Why does mail still come for a name he swears isn't his? Riley's voice sharpened. Because some people won't let things go. They want a villain, not the truth. Jonah was a kid. He didn't start the fire. The words hung there. He didn't start the fire. Not he wasn't there. Look, she said, softer again. If you care about him, stop digging. He'll tell you in his own time. Please. We ended the call with a brittle promise to grab coffee sometime. I went back inside and tried to focus on orders, but my brain kept replaying the gaps in her sentences. That night, when Jonah finally crashed early, I sat on the edge of our bathtub with my laptop balanced on the sink. I typed Ridgeview Youth Center fire into the search bar and hit enter. The fourth result was a scanned police report from 12 years ago, pages yellowed in the PDF. Witness names blurred together until one line seemed to glow in the middle of the screen. Noah Price was listed as the last person seen alive. After that night, the words on the police report burned behind my eyelids every time I blinked. At work, I mixed up orders and overfilled cups. At home, Jonah's footsteps in the hallway sounded like gunshots. He moved around me carefully, like we were two magnets flipped the wrong way. We talked about dishes and bills, never about Ridgeview. Every time he walked past the bathroom, I pictured the laptop screen glowing with his other name. I told myself that maybe the report was old, mistaken, blown out of proportion. People get misidentified all the time, right? Still, a question gnawed at me. If Jonah had really done nothing wrong, why build his whole life on a lie? On my next day off, I made a decision that felt like trespassing. I called in a favor from a customer who owed me for weeks of free refills. A bus driver who covered half the city. Ridgeview, he said, eyebrows raising. That place is a ghost town these days. You sure you want to go there? 3 transfers later, I stepped off in front of a peeling sign that read Welcome to Ridgeview, home of the Panthers. The air smelled like cut grass and something faintly chemical. Down the road, behind a chain-link fence and a row of thin birch trees, stood the burned-out skeleton of what had once been the youth center. Most of the building had been demolished, but one blackened wall still stood, tagged with graffiti. Monsters burned too. My stomach rolled. I almost turned back. Can I help you? A voice called from a nearby porch. An older woman in a faded floral dress was watering a hanging basket, hose looped around her wrist. She eyed me with the cautious curiosity of someone who has seen too many reporters knock on too many doors. I'm just visiting, I managed. I used to know someone from here. A lot of someone's used to be from here, she said. Not many come back. She set down the hose. You looking for the youth center story, or for Noah? The name hit harder spoken aloud than on any screen today. I walked closer to the porch, gravel crunching under my shoes. You knew him? I asked. Noah. Mrs. Ortiz studied me for a long second, then motioned to the empty chair beside her. You don't look like a reporter, she said. They dress better and pretend they're not recording. Her gaze flicked to my cracked phone screen. Sit. Tell me why a city boy is standing in front of a pile of ashes on his day off. I sank into the chair, heart hammering. Lying felt pointless here. My roommate, I said. My best friend. He looks exactly like the pictures of Noah online. Only he calls himself Jonah. Her mouth pressed into a thin line. I figured something like that. When you didn't flinch at the name, she murmured. Noah always said he wished he could start over somewhere else. New town, new name, no more whispers. She turned toward the scarred outline of the youth center. Before the fire, this place was everything, she said. Homework help, games, kids who needed somewhere to be that wasn't a bad house. Noah practically lived here. So did the others. The others? I asked. Kids from rough homes. Foster placements. Some with records. She met my eyes. When the fire happened, people wanted someone to blame. It was easier to point at a troubled boy than a faulty building or a lazy inspector. The podcast said someone died, I said, my voice thin. One boy, she answered. Miguel, 12. Fix-it genius, always covered in grease. He never made it out. Her hand trembled on the arm of her chair. They said Noah was seen leaving right before the alarms. Said he'd been yelling about the doors being locked. By the time investigators admitted the wiring was bad, it didn't matter. The town had already decided who the monster was. Did he ever tell you his side? I whispered. She shook her head. He disappeared before he could. People like that don't get to tell their side. Her gaze pinned me in place. If your friend is my Noah, he's been living under a sentence ever since. The bus ride home from Ridgeview felt longer, like distance had stretched along with everything I'd just learned. I watched the burned-out youth center recede through the window and thought about a 12-year-old who never got out, about a 16-year-old who did and never stopped running. My reflection hovered over the glass, pale and tired. I imagined Jonah as a scared kid pounding on locked doors, and as the man who leaned in close at the bar and threatened a stranger into silence. Back in our apartment, the air smelled like detergent and takeout. Jonah wasn't home. His room door was cracked open, a small detail that suddenly felt like an invitation and a trap at the same time. I stood there, heart pounding, arguing with myself. Snooping was wrong. Snooping might be the only way to know if I was living with a victim, a coward, or something much worse. In the end, fear won. I slipped into his room. His space was strangely neat for someone so chaotic in public. Bed made, books stacked, laundry corralled into one overflowing basket. On his desk, his laptop slept, lid closed. I didn't dare touch it. But in the top drawer, under a tangle of receipts and old pay stubs, I found a faded spiral notebook with Noah scribbled inside the cover. The first pages were normal teenage nonsense. Band logos, half-finished song lyrics, doodles of guitars. Then the entries turned into something else. Short, frantic paragraphs dated the week of the fire. Doors locked again tonight. Counselor says it's for safety. Miguel joked we're prisoners. Alarm test failed. Staff laughed it off. Found lighter under vending machine. Told them. They shrugged. My fingers trembled as I snapped photos of each page with my phone. This was more than gossip. It was a paper trail of adults failing kids, of a system that turned negligence into a ghost story about a bad boy. I didn't hear the front door until it clicked shut. Alex. Jonah's voice floated down the hallway. You home? Panic surged. I shoved the notebook back, smoothed the papers, closed the drawer. By the time he reached his doorway, I was perched on his bed, pretending to tie my shoe, phone shoved in my pocket and racing like my pulse. You look like you just swallowed a crime scene. I forced a laugh that sounded like it belonged to someone braver. Just tired, I said, standing up too fast. Double shift. My brain's soup. Jonah studied me, eyes narrowing. You went somewhere today, he said. You have that adventure smell. Bus exhaust and bad coffee. He wasn't wrong. Errands, I lied. Rent's due. He reached past me to toss his backpack onto the bed, and for a second I thought his hand would brush the drawer. My skin prickled. Instead, he sank onto the mattress, elbows on his knees. The bravado I was used to was gone, replaced by something rawer. "Alex," he said quietly, "are you mad at me?" It wasn't the question I expected. "I'm confused," I admitted. "People keep calling you by another name. There are podcasts and police reports and mail for you that you pretend don't exist. I don't know how to be chill about that." He winced like each word was a slap. "I told you my past is a mess. But I didn't hurt anyone, okay? I just left. Would you rather I'd stayed and burned up with everything else?" The image of the youth center's blackened wall flashed behind my eyes. "I don't know what I'd rather," I said. "I just want the truth." His jaw clenched. "The truth is that Noah is dead," he snapped. "I'm Jonah now. I'm the guy who splits rent with you and remembers your coffee order. Isn't that enough?" It might have been once. He scrubbed his hands over his face. "If people dredge that crap up again, they won't care what really happened. They'll just see headlines. I'll lose my job, this apartment, everything. And you?" He looked up, eyes shining. "You'll be the guy who helped them find me." My phone buzzed between us on the bed, screen lighting up with an unknown number and the words "possible spam." Jonah glanced at it, then back at me. "Please don't answer that," he whispered. "Just stay here. With me. Forget Ridgeview." Guilt twisted in my gut. I almost hit decline without thinking. But my thumb hovered, and the call kept ringing. At the last second, I swiped to accept. "Hello. Hi. Is this Alex Bennett?" the caller asked. "This is Detective Harris from Ridgeview PD. I'd like to ask you a few questions about someone named Noah Price." Jonah's eyes widened as he realized exactly who was on the other end. I hung up the call with my heart pounding against my ribs. Detective Harris hadn't threatened me, exactly. He'd just asked careful questions: how I knew Jonah, whether he'd ever used another name, if I was aware of the Ridgeview case. His tone was calm, almost gentle, but every answer I gave felt like walking a tightrope over a bonfire. "I'm not asking you to spy," he'd said. "But if he's living under a false identity because he's scared, we need to know if that fear is about guilt or about the people who failed him. There are families who never got closure. That includes his." When I hung up, Jonah was still staring at me like I'd grown a second head. "Who was that?" he asked. "Spam," I lied automatically. "Wrong number." His jaw worked. "Alex, if you're talking to anyone about me." "I'm not." I cut in, lying so hard my teeth hurt. "But maybe you should be. Maybe running isn't working as well as you think." He flinched like I'd slapped him and left the room. Minutes later, I heard the shower start, water pounding tile hard enough to drown out anything. That night, I called Mrs. Ortiz from the bathroom with the fan on and asked if she'd be willing to talk to a detective. She agreed without hesitation. "If it helps that boy stop running, I'll do it," she said. The next part of the plan made me feel sick. I texted Riley, "We need to talk. In person. Jonah won't listen to me, but he might listen to you." She responded almost immediately, "Name the time and place." By midnight, I'd arranged what felt like an ambush I kept calling an intervention. Jonah thought we were hosting a movie night that weekend, us and Riley. In reality, I'd asked Detective Harris to be waiting in his car around the corner, ready to come up if things exploded. Mrs. Ortiz agreed to be on speakerphone. "Are you sure about this?" Harris asked. "Once you push this into the open, you can't put it back." I wasn't sure of anything except that secrets were already hurting people. Keeping quiet felt like choosing a side without admitting it. On Saturday evening, as I straightened the living room and set out chips, Jonah flopped onto the couch and grinned. "This going to be as awkward as meeting your parents?" he joked. "If we're lucky," I said, glancing at the door and listening for Riley's knock. Riley arrived first, all perfume and worry, clutching a tote bag. She hugged Jonah with the stiff enthusiasm of someone performing for an audience. "Look at you," she said. "Domestic. Chips and everything." He laughed, tension easing a notch. Alex insisted. "He thinks snacks solve trauma." "If only," I muttered. We made small talk for a few minutes. Work, weather, the show Jonah loved. My palms were damp. When Jonah went to grab drinks from the kitchen, Riley rounded on me in a harsh whisper. "Is he in danger?" she asked. "You sounded intense." "In danger of being swallowed by his own lies," I said. "But there are other people still living in that story, Riley. They deserve more than a podcast getting the last word." Before she could reply, Jonah came back with beers. I took a breath that felt like stepping off a ledge. Actually, there's someone I want you both to talk to, I said, pulling out my phone. My thumb hovered over Mrs. Ortiz's contact. Jonah's smile flickered. Dude, what is this? He asked. You're freaking me out. I hit call before I could lose my nerve. The speaker crackled. Then Mrs. Ortiz's warm, steady voice filled the room. Hola, she said. Alex. Yeah, I said. And someone else who needs to hear you. When she said, Noah, the world seemed to hold its breath. Jonah went pale. Hang up, he whispered. Right now. I've got Detective Harris on standby, I said. He's outside. He has the original report, and I've seen it. We can't keep pretending this never happened. You called the police? Jonah exploded. Are you insane? Do you know what they did to me last time? They never charged you, Riley said, voice shaking. You ran before they could figure it out. That's because they didn't care about truth, just closing a file. Jonah shouted. He hurled the TV remote at the wall, plastic shattering. On the phone, Mrs. Ortiz spoke softly, cutting through the chaos. Mijo, she said. You were the one who tried to open the door. You screamed for them to unlock it. You dragged 2 kids out before the smoke took you down. Jonah's shoulders sagged like invisible strings had been cut. For the first time, I saw guilt and innocence warring across the same exhausted face. Detective Harris didn't storm in. He knocked like a neighbor asking to borrow sugar. The sound made all 3 of us flinch. Jonah whispered, Don't, but my feet were already moving. When I opened the door, Harris stood in the hallway in plain clothes, badge on a chain, eyes tired but not unkind. Evening, he said. I'm not here to arrest anyone tonight. I just want to make sure the record is finally straight. Behind me, Jonah laughed, a broken sound. Record? You already wrote your version, he said. Town hero dies, troubled kid runs. Everyone points at the easiest target. Harris stepped inside. He greeted Riley, then glanced at the phone on the coffee table where Mrs. Ortiz waited in tense silence. The living room felt too small for all the history crammed into it. Mrs. Ortiz gave a statement back then, Harris said. It wasn't given the weight it deserved. I've spent years trying to fix what I can. He placed a thin folder on the table. Noah, he looked at Jonah. We have proof the fire started in the electrical closet, behind a locked door you tried to open. Staff were warned about the wiring. They ignored it. The person who locked those kids and resigned quietly and moved states. You didn't set the fire. Jonah stared at the folder like it might explode. Then why did everyone look at me like I had matches in my hands? He asked. Why did they spray paint monster on my locker? Because grief needs somewhere to land, Harris said. And your history made you convenient. You ran, and it sealed the story. Riley wiped her eyes. We thought you'd be locked up forever, she whispered. Mom told everyone we didn't know where you were. You could have answered one letter, Mrs. Ortiz said faintly through the phone. You could have said you were alive, Mijo. The room buzzed with other people's anger and sorrow, but my own life was rearranging itself. If Jonah faced charges for identity fraud, I'd lose my roommate. If this went public, the cafe would be flooded with gawkers. Our friends would pick sides. Harris looked at me finally. I'm going to file for a formal update to the report, he said. In the meantime, Alex, people may come to you for answers. I realized that telling the truth meant I'd just signed up to live inside the fallout. The days after the confrontation blurred into a new, exhausting kind of normal. News didn't explode the way I'd feared. There were no TV vans outside our building. But online, the story spread through local forums and true crime subreddits like wildfire. Someone recognized Jonah from the podcast thumbnail and posted a grainy photo of him leaving our apartment. Suddenly, strangers were dissecting his facial expressions, debating whether he looked guilty, heroic, or both. At the cafe, a couple whispered loudly enough for me to hear. That's the roommate, one said. He probably knew the whole time. My manager pulled me aside and asked if we were safe from stalkers. I started taking the trash out through the alley, avoiding the front sidewalk when my shift ended. Jonah crashed on the couch most nights, TV flickering, volume low. Sometimes I'd find him awake at 3 a.m., staring at nothing. Harris kept his word. There were no handcuffs, just paperwork, interviews, the slow grinding of bureaucracy reconsidering a story it had already told itself. One afternoon, after a stranger followed me halfway home filming on their phone, I booked a therapy appointment through an online portal and didn't cancel it. The therapist, a calm woman with kind eyes, didn't flinch when I said, "My best friend might be the town scapegoat for a fatal fire," and I helped drag him into the light. She talked about secondary trauma, boundaries, and the difference between supporting someone and shielding them from consequences. "You can't be his alibi and his therapist," she said. "That's not kindness. That's self-erasure." At home, I started making small changes. I asked Jonah to put his legal name on the mailbox and to email his manager about updating his employment records. I told him I wouldn't answer questions for him anymore. If people wanted his side, they would have to hear it from his mouth. He agreed to some of it and sulked about the rest. "You're really done covering for me, huh?" he said one night, trying to make it a joke and failing. "For both of us," I answered. "We write down what we're willing to do and what we're not. No more unspoken deals." That night, drawing up those boundaries on printer paper felt more terrifying than calling a detective. It's been 6 months since the night Mrs. Ortiz's voice echoed through my living room and blew Jonah's carefully built life open. The investigation into the youth center is technically ongoing, which mostly means that lawyers and insurance companies are arguing over who failed whom first. Harris keeps me updated in brief texts. Update filed. Statement added. Family notified. There are no neat endings, just slightly less awful versions of the truth. Jonah, Noah, when he's feeling brave enough to say it out loud, started going to therapy too. Some days he comes home wrung out and quiet. Other days he rants about how people still cross the street to avoid him. We don't live together anymore. After a few months, we both agreed that constantly seeing each other's worst moments in the hallway wasn't helping. He moved into a studio across town. We meet for coffee twice a week in a neutral cafe that doesn't know our history. Sometimes he apologizes for lying to me for years. Sometimes he thanks me for forcing everything into daylight. I don't always know how to respond to either. People online still argue about him. In one thread, someone wrote, "If my best friend turned out to be that guy, I'd bail." Another person replied, "Maybe you'd also be that guy if adults had locked you in." I don't wade in. I just close the tab and focus on the life in front of me. The regular who tips in crumpled singles, the coworker who brings me soup when I'm sick, the small stack of savings growing in a jar labeled somewhere new. If you've listened this far, here's what I've learned. Loving someone doesn't mean agreeing to be blind. You can hold compassion and still say, "This part of your story isn't mine to cover up." Ask questions when something feels off. Document things. Talk to professionals instead of making yourself the whole support system. Mostly, remember that secrets don't just belong to the person keeping them. They live in the people who orbit them, too. The last time I saw Jonah, we sat on a park bench watching kids race across a playground, their laughter loud and uncomplicated.